guys, what's up? I am sorry that I'm late today. I wanted an extra 15 minutes of sleep. So, I apologize. Good morning, Judy, Marty, Jennifer, Wiggles, Nancy. I'm still sleepy. No, it was not 30 minutes. And I am not awake yet. In one of her parole hearings, a parole board member said the following: she was unrepentant, unremorseful, and callous. She said in those hearings, Broderick repeatedly blamed the victims. Yeah, you don't get parole if you don't take responsibility for your actions. So I don't think Betty is ever going to get parole. Because she just cannot. She just cannot let it go that this was her fault. It's her fault. If she had just shut up and let the divorce lawyer, well, she didn't have a divorce lawyer part of the time. She reminds me of Sarah Boone. But if she had just shut up and let the divorce lawyers do their job, this could have been over and done with like a normal divorce. But no. Wiggles, you know why it wasn't a half an hour? I came in early for you. That's why I lied to you. I came in early for you. I could have scrolled YouTube shorts for another 10, 15 minutes, whatever it was. So there. Yeah, how dare his wife call herself Mrs. Broderick? How dare she? Oh, I'm so glad you have put me in a category higher than your luggage. What, Belle? I just fed you part of my egg sandwich. What? What? I don't have anything else. We just had breakfast. It's not time for second breakfast. Oh no, that was your second breakfast. There's no such thing as third breakfast. You're done. I'm trying to think if there was something I was going to talk about. I don't think there was anything I was going to talk about today. We are on Dr. Park. Who names her kid Park? Is that a name? Park Dietz, who is a psychologist, talking about Betty's personality disorders. And I think he is on narcissist personality disorder. And then after narcissistic personality disorder, he's going to talk about histrionic. Second breakfast is a thing. Okay, I apologize, Belle. She's like, I don't care, just feed me. Just feed me food. She's had first breakfast and second breakfast because she had part of my first breakfast. She's like, where's the food? Where's the food? There's no food. We just finished the food. She's so cute. Are you looking for cookies? You need a dessert for second breakfast? Did you call your Aunt Judy and tell her to say that? Uh-oh what? Don't uh-oh.
The roller coaster. That guy died. There's got more reports. Other people got injured from it.
Oh, I guess I'm not riding it. I saw a thumbnail today that I didn't get to watch the video, Wiggles. That they're gonna change. They're gonna change something with that roller coaster. I hope they do, cause you know the lap bar, it comes over your head, but it doesn't have shoulder straps or restraints. It comes down over, but the bars on the sides don't come over your shoulder. It goes next to you. So it's still just a lap bar.
Yeah.
So there's nothing that holds you down in the seat, so you get more air time.
Right. That's good.
And they're speculating the reason the guy died was because he, I guess, got thrown forward and hit his head. And then he was unconscious from the head hit. And then he couldn't hold, like, he, I guess, got banged around in the seat or whatever.
He just flopping.
Yeah. So I ain't riding that. You give me shoulder harnesses where I'm tucked in tight and I'm not going to be flapping around, I'll ride it. I don't want to be a rag doll on a dang roller coaster. Jeez.
Okay, see you.
Okay, love you too. Oh, you had a production meeting. Okay. You had a production meeting with Aunt Judy. Come here. Come here. Come here. Come here. Come here. I need to wash your face, youngin'. It's dirty. What are they going to think about your mother if you go out in public with a dirty face like that? So, that, the roller coaster thing, I know you probably don't care, but the roller coaster thing, the front seats have, like, the back seats don't. Like, the back seats, all you have in front of you is the seat in front of you. But the front seat, there's, like, a decorative kind of thing in front of you, and it is, like, instead of being like up here, it's like down here, like lower. So now this is just speculation, but the speculation is that he went forward, like over the lap bar, and then hit his head on that piece in front of him, which knocked him out. And then he was like, you know, he couldn't control his body because he was unconscious. And then but he had a spinal cord injury. So there's a question of liability, but there are signs everywhere. If you have a back condition, don't ride. So anyway, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to get off on a tangent. That was my husband. Anyway. Yeah, that's true. But I had to lose weight in order to fit. I've not ridden at either one of those. There's one at Islands of Adventure, the Velocicoaster. It's made by the same company, and the seating, the lap bar is the same way. It goes upside down over water. My stepdaughters love that ride. Um, my youngest stepdaughter lost her shoes on that ride because your feet dangle. It's a floorless coaster. And she was wearing flip flops, and she took them off and put them underneath her butt, like she sat on them, knowing that she was going to come off out of her seat, and it goes upside down over water, and she lost her flip flops in the water, in the lake. Like, it's not like a little water feature, it's a lake. She lost her shoes. That was dumb, Kristen. You knew that you come out of your seat. Why did you sit on your shoe? So I won't be riding those unless they do change the lap bar to a shoulder restraint system.
What about the grandiose sense of self-importance that you mentioned as one of the diagnostic criteria? Did you see any facts in the case file that reflected that in the defendant?
Yes. One example was telling Kim that when she divorced Dan, she was going to marry the Prince of Saudi Arabia next because he'd buy her everything she wanted. I see it as grandiose to have said that the guy asked me to marry him every day for 3 years, or to say I finally married him, meaning Dan, out of pity. He wanted me so bad. Those are all grandiose sorts of statements. Yet another is from Mrs. Broderick's book manuscript written in February of '88, where she wrote, "Let me tell you about my optimism. I am a very up and forgiving, friendly person. I try not to dwell on disappointment or unhappiness and try to make the best of things and go on. This trait of mine is very valuable to others. It is very uplifting and encouraging and happy. I am a great wife and mother, teacher and friend because of it. I am always positive and happy." Now, that's a grandiose statement about her. That is, it inflates, at least to some extent, the value and worth and extent of these traits. And besides that, of course, it's inconsistent with the claim that she was suicidal when she wrote that. Another example was Mrs. Broderick frequently stating to other people that she had a gun and was going to kill Dan and Linda, and rationalizing that when she did so, she wouldn't get in any trouble for it because the world would thank her for it. And in fact, even said that a jury would let her off. That view that the world would thank her for the homicides, and that she'd be let off, is a grandiose view, that because she's so important, she's so special, she wouldn't be accountable.
What about the next diagnostic criteria? Did you find anything under that reflected in the case file that shows the defendant was a narcissistic personality disorder?
Yes, the fourth characteristic is that of believing one's problems are unique and can only be understood by other special people. In her diary, she shows that she believes no one else understands how much she goes through. Also, in a letter that she drafted to Judge Joseph, there's a statement in which she indicated that she thought that homicide would be justifiable if she didn't get her own way. And then she crossed out that statement. That, too, shows her sense of having special problems. She wrote, if he is trying to build a case for justifiable homicide, he is doing a great job.
What about under the next diagnostic criteria?
The fifth is the preoccupation with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, or ideal love. And with respect to that criterion, one example is a passage in her diary where she refers to hers as, quote, one of the world's nicest families, end quote. Again, putting the notion that it is not just good or fine or promising or special, but one of the best in the world. That's what makes it a sign of this disorder. The sixth criterion is having a sense of entitlement, the expectation that others will treat one specially. And here, again, there are many examples. One of the most telling is from December of 1987, where at Christmas, Mrs. Broderick wrote in her diary a list of the things that she felt entitled to, but of which she thought she was being deprived. She wrote, "My lifestyle has been trashed. No tree, no one to help carry it in, load the car, etc. No one to see it, no party, no kids, no attic, no coffee table, no country club memberships, no boat for parade of lights, no Jag, only truck, no escort, no parties, no gowns, no presents by or for me, no ski party, no ski trip, no large party, no money." Now, that passage is one of a number that show something of Mrs. Broderick's priorities. And I think it's relevant to point out that that was the same Christmas that she had the opportunity to have the children, but wouldn't take them because Dan wouldn't give her $6,000 for a ski trip. At the same time,
Sure. Take our noon recess at this time, but before we do, I should have mentioned this to you earlier, Mr. Schmidt. If you want to move over to the more comfortable chair after the noon recess, that's fine. It's up to you. But that one swivels, the one you're in doesn't, so it may be more comfortable for you. Please remember the admonition, gentlemen, to discuss yourselves, nor allow anyone else to discuss it with, nor submitted to you. See you at 1:30. You proceed, Mr. Burkhoff. Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Dietz, I think we were, when we adjourned before lunchtime, on the seventh criteria, diagnostic criteria for narcissistic disorder. And that talks about requiring constant attention and admiration. Did you find any facts as to that in your review of the case file?
yes.
Please tell us about that.
Well, for example, in the marriage encounter book that was written in November 1976, there are three of the statements Mrs. Broderick wrote that I think are examples of that. One is her statement, quote, "I feel like no one admires me, and I need that," end quote. That is, the need for admirations understood and expressed. A second is, she wrote, "The number one thing I loved about you was how much you loved me," and then she added, "and showed it." The point there is that what she loved most about Dan was how much he loved her. It's the reflected glory that she received from Dan that she found particularly attractive about him. And thirdly, she was answering a question as to the 5 things that she liked best about Dan and herself, and one of the 5 things she listed was, "People seem to envy us." And that again reflects the desire, the need for being admired and receiving attention from others. A later example is the way Mrs. Broderick described her feelings of being exploited by her own children when they didn't give her enough presents or enough attention. She wrote in a diary entry dated January 3rd, 1988, quote, "I'm very sick of my kids always taking advantage of my sweetness and generosity and getting nothing in return. No Christmas presents, no visits unless they want money, no love," end quote.
What about the 8th criteria, lack of empathy?
Yes, there's a great deal of evidence to support that as well.
Do you have any particular factual instances you'd like to tell us about?
Yes, among them are the nonchalance that Mrs. Broderick conveyed about the effects of dumping her children at their father's door. That is, her lack of concern about the effect that would have on them. With that, as with the obscene messages, she simply wouldn't. She refused to be influenced by the opinions of others. People had told her, and repeatedly, that this was not good for the kids, but that didn't prevent her from doing this. She seemed to be oblivious to the effects that this would have on them, even after she was warned about it. In one of the conversations recorded with Danny, for example, she says, "I'm too embarrassed to even tell anybody I know you guys." which is the kind of thing that she was capable of understanding would be harmful to a child, and that she'd been told not to do things like that. She's an intelligent woman who has better sense than that. And she even acknowledged having read many books on divorce, and of course they talk about the effects on children of this kind of behavior. What was important to her, Dan and Linda, than to prevent the possible harms to the children. Another example is from a statement that Mrs. Broderick made to Dr. Nelson in February of '87 about Rhett. Dr. Nelson quoted her as saying, "I don't want to care for him. If I do 10 more years of child care and not take care of myself, I'll end up with nothing. Rhett will have to go back to Dan and do the best he can. I have to take care of myself." That, like the other examples, reflects her priorities and indicates that she is not as sensitive to the needs of other people as to her own, and that's what's described as a lack of empathy.
And Doctor, the last criteria for narcissism, the preoccupation with feelings of envy, did you find any facts in the case file to support those?
Yes.
That diagnostic criteria? Please tell us about that.
Well, again, so some examples out of many are Mrs. Broderick's children saying that if they did anything with their father and Linda, their mother would be furious, calling them traitors and worse, but then later she'd want to know every detail about what had gone on in Dan and Linda's life. And that's also confirmed by many of her friends and by Dan's housekeepers, that she wants to know what they're doing. Likewise, in a taped message, Mrs. Broderick revealed something of the connection between her preoccupation with feelings of envy and her desire for revenge when she said, and I quote, "I close my eyes and I see you in the cunt, and I see you doing all your wonderful things, and you're going to be so sorry," end quote. That's reflective of her preoccupation, that she would fantasize repeatedly about such a thing, and that preoccupation with it, thinking about them together, was associated with her feelings of revenge, as she threatens they'll be sorry. Yet another example is that what occurred at the attempted mediation with Dr. Ruth Roth, it was clear from that Mrs. Broderick was so envious of Linda that it was more important to her to obtain revenge than to be able to keep the children. Dr. Roth quoted her as saying, quote, "Not going to be a single mother of 4. I've already told you that. He will die first. I'm not letting the little was mine, and he will stay mine," end quote. That reflects envy.
Now, taking the general population as a whole, is the narcissistic personality disorder that uncommon?
No, there are not accurate data on what proportion of the population suffers it, but we know it's common. You can find it in the floor of the Senate, in any legislative hallway, in any TV newsroom, in any dugout for a major league team. Narcissism is an attribute among many people, including those who are successful, who enjoy the limelight and are prideful about it and see themselves as special and more important than other people. So it's something we all run across this in our everyday lives too, when we find people who expect special favors, who don't expect to have to do things the ordinary way. They expect shortcuts and special attention. It's not a rare condition. Most of the time we don't even notice it because it's so prevalent and such an important facet of everyday life that we don't even recognize it as abnormal most of the time we're with people who are narcissistic.
Okay. Let's shift gears for a second and go to another area. What is a histrionic personality, Doctor?
Histrionic.
So do I, because I'm an RN. I'm an RN, and all RNs should get special treatment because they're RNs. Yeah. Did I tell you I'm an RN? Yeah, I'm an RN.
Personality refers to, in the lesser form, traits, or in the more troublesome form, a disorder in which individuals are primarily characterized, and again, this is from DSM-3R, which tries to give the essential features of each condition. A pervasive pattern of being too emotional, that is, in the technical words, excessive emotionality, and being attention-seeking, which means what it sounds like, people who try to get attention. So those are the two essential ingredients. Now, as with the narcissistic personality disorder, there are a number of different characteristics listed, 8 specific, and before someone's given the diagnosis of having the histrionic personality disorder, one must find that they have at least 5 of the 8 characteristics that are listed. And moreover, before it's called a disorder, it either has to trouble them that they have these needs and wants and behaviors, or else has to interfere with how they get along with other people.
What are the
Female nurse, my pronouns are she, her, in case you couldn't tell by looking at me.
8 diagnostic criteria that you've just talked about?
Actually, I don't have all 8 of them at hand. I only have at hand the ones that I thought there was evidence for in this case.
How many are those?
5.
Okay, why don't we go with those?
Those 5 are expressive emotion, appropriate exaggeration. For example, having temper tantrums. And this refers to the tendency to overreact to things, to show too much emotion in response to whatever the events really call for, and to be constantly making things out to be more than they are. That is, this constant tendency to exaggerate, usually in some emotional direction, and often, as it turns out, for the purpose of having impact on the audience.
Doctor, did you put any particular facts in your review of all the case material here that supported a finding in criteria?
Oh, yes.
Please tell us about that.
Well, some examples are statements that Mrs. Broderick has made that are emotional statements in which, for emotional reasons, something is inappropriately exaggerated, such as her statement, "I was turned out into the street penniless by my husband." Or her statement, "Dan Broderick kidnapped my children and held them hostage for 4 years." Or, "I was getting bludgeoned. In fact, I considered it a gang rape by what was going on." That referred to the press and the public not being allowed in the courtroom during the dissolution proceedings. Or another one was her statement, "I really don't know what you mean as a narcissistic marriage." This is in response to a letter she'd received. If this is a story at all, it's a story of total corruption of the local legal system. "I was gang raped by the Bar Association for 5 years. Half of them helped their friend Dan Broderick break the laws to destroy me. The other half turned their backs on me and wouldn't help me get any legal representation." Or her statement, "I was terminated as a mother," from her testimony in this trial. Or her statement that she'd received a threatening letter from Dan, when the letter, which still exists, actually shows that he was saying that if she didn't let him know what furniture she wanted, he would sell it. Now, each of those is an exaggeration from the actual meaning of events, sometimes using very colorful metaphors, which of course attract a lot of attention, but it's not an accurate historical account of what happened with bludgeoning and gang rape and kidnapping and so on.
What about the diagnostic criteria that the defendant is uncomfortable in situations in which he or she is not, well, that a narcissistic person is, strike that histrionic person is uncomfortable in situations in which he or she is not the center of attention? Did you find any indicia of that in your review of the case file? Yes,
that's the second histrionic feature that I think is supported amply by the evidence. Here the point is this need for attention and being the center of attention, and in that way it's like the narcissistic trait of needing attention and admiration. It's phrased a little differently, and here it's phrased that the person's uncomfortable if they're not the center of attention. But it's not so different. An example of this is provided in something that Mrs. Broderick wrote that shows how part of her gratification in the marriage came from the attention that came to her as a result of being Mrs. Daniel Broderick, and the ability that being married to him gave her to have lavish and extravagant parties. She wrote, "In 1983, we were on top of the world. Our home was almost completely decorated by me, and I was so proud of how it looked. We had money for maids, cars, trips, clothes, etc. We not only attended charity affairs, but we were able to host full tables and invite our friends." Well, that reflects her sense of loss, as she wistfully recalls this, of having been the center of attention, because it's uncomfortable to her not to be able to be in that position. And also, many of Mrs. Broderick's friends noted that what upset her after the divorce wasn't the emotional loss of Dan as a person, but really the loss of social status, because she had had quite high status in that marriage. Still another example comes from a description of a party that Mrs. Broderick went to. This is written after the separation, about December 5th of 1987, the Learn Aloud party. She wrote, "Besides being fat and having no money to bid in the auction, I am so broken-hearted. I have no personality when talking to people. I have nothing fun and positive to talk about, like new furs and jewels, trips, home remodels, kids, etc."
Oh, good Lord.
Again, mourning the loss of being the center of attention and of being able to play that role that she enjoyed and which gratified her.
More to talk about than that.
Dr. Dietz, what about the next criteria, which has to do with displaying rapidly shifting and shallow expressions of emotion? Did you note any facts in the case file to support that criteria?
Yes, there's quite a bit to indicate that Mrs. Broderick's emotions quickly move from one to the next. She can shift between moods rapidly and shift back.
If I had a friend that all they wanted to talk about was their jewels and furs and money and things they had, trips, I could not stand to be around them for very long, because I would feel like they were bragging about all the good stuff they had that I didn't have. So I wouldn't want to hear it. So I would find someone more interesting if they didn't talk about those things. That blows my mind. She's like, "Well, I didn't have those things to talk about." Well, that would be a good thing in my book. Good Lord, she's even crazier than I thought she was.
Just as rapidly. The
Yeah.
The diaries have many, many entries about times that she was upset for a day or two, or depressed for a day or two, or worried for a day or two, or angry over and over and over, and not usually just for a day or two with anger. Toward the children, she even shows these kinds of shifts between loving the children and being very proud of them and pleased with them, to, for some quite temporary reason, being furious with them and wanting to disown them, being hostile or condemning them and calling them names. And you can even hear this even in the course of a single conversation, where she goes from sounding the loving mother to sounding very angry with the child or willing to use the child, back to being more motherly. The shifts happen quickly, and they don't stay in place for long, nor do they reflect any central change in how she sees people. It's just this constant fluttering of emotions. Another example is the way she's disowned long-term friends or family members, or at least temporarily said she'd done so, because they wouldn't side with her in her hatred toward Dan and Linda.
What about the next criteria, having to do with actions being directed towards obtaining immediate satisfaction and having no tolerance and a frustration for delayed gratification?
Well, that's the technical language DSM-3R uses. It's referred to as being self-centered in the list of criteria. It's something that's more familiar to people as the way children behave, where they want what they want when they want it. They want it right now. They have to have their needs met immediately. Mrs. Broderick even wrote in 1976 a statement quite along those lines. This is in her marriage encounter book where she wrote, "I hate to have people tell me to do things. I like to do what I feel like when I feel like."
And as to the last criteria, having a style of speech that's excessively impressionistic and lacking in detail, did you find any facts to support that criteria?
Yes, actually, I've already given some examples of how her speech is vague and does not focus on the details of things. She paints with a broad and colorful brush designed to achieve an effect on the listener, and without much concern for the details of what's being said or the historical truth of what's being said. So she will sometimes speak out of emotion about how she felt without concern for the fact that the words she used aren't about what really happened. They're about how she felt. I gave you some examples before of these sorts of colorful word pictures talking about herself as homeless or penniless, or the kids having been held hostage, or Dan having kidnapped them, or being gang raped. Now, these do attract attention, which fulfills both her narcissistic needs and also her histrionic needs to be at the center of attention. But they don't accurately describe what happened. Even when histrionics are exaggerating, however, they know the truth. They know what the truth is. And if they're pushed on it, if they're confronted, then they will back down and they will readily acknowledge that I wasn't actually homeless or I wasn't exactly penniless, but I felt that way.
Why do histrionics use exaggeration?
Well, there are a couple of reasons. One is because they do tend to be responding emotionally, and the emotional pitch is more important to them than whether it's what a witness would have seen or what was objectively the case. But it's also because this helps keep them in the limelight, helps keep things exciting, makes things interesting, captures the attention of other people, keeps other people on the edge of their seats, or makes things more entertaining for them. And it's because of behaviors like this that histrionic characteristics are quite valued by people who are in the performing arts, and that one finds so much of it in Hollywood. That tendency to be colorful and flamboyant and emotional has a market in our society.
Well, what's the prevalence of histrionic personality disorder among the general population?
In Hollywood, sky high. In the rest of the country, not so high, but still, there's plenty. I mean, I can't imagine anyone ever has a party without a feeling there. It's that common, but but it hasn't been measured to my knowledge.
Now, Dr. DeFrancesca, you reviewed her testimony?
Yes.
Dr. DeFrancesca has testified in this trial that histrionics, in using her words, are people pleasers. Is that the way you would describe a histrionic professionally?
When they're in a good mood, that's right. That what histrionics do is to entertain their viewers, whether it's on television or on a date, and they are colorful and they're flamboyant and they're fun. And as long as you don't have to meet their needs, and then it can get tiresome and wear thin. But they can be very attractive and can be a great deal of fun to be with. They know how to work an audience, how to please the people that they want to please. And in that sense, that's true.
Did you have the opportunity to review a letter that the defendant wrote Dr. Duss in, I believe, 1988?
Excuse me. To Dr.
A letter that the defendant wrote to Dr. Duss in 1988?
Yes.
Do you have a copy of that with you?
Mm-hmm.
Were there any particular passages that you took note of in that letter that are specifically illuminating of either the defendant's narcissistic or histrionic personality?
Yes, there are quite a few.
Please go ahead.
Okay, the letter begins, "Dear Dr. Dess, I am still waiting for the statement of a single fact that led you to your grandiose conclusion. Now, that opening sentence is hostile and accusatory, which, because of the context, can be seen to be an example of this narcissistic rage. What has happened is that he has made a finding and given an opinion in connection with her custody and visitation pursuit that it's unfavorable to her, and she's enraged by that, and so she goes on to attack both him and Dan. In your letter of September 17, 1988, explaining your evaluation of the Broderick custody, I fail to find a single name or fact that leads to your dramatic and totally erroneous conclusion. If I have to tell this story again, I'm going to vomit. Well, that's an example of the narcissistic rage in response to criticism, because she's very angry. It's obvious from what she writes. But it's also histrionic exaggeration. It's not that she's literally going to vomit. It is that she feels that upset, or wants to convey to an audience that she feels that upset. And at the same time, this has within it an example of the narcissistic grandiosity, that sense of being, of having a swelled ego, where she says that there's not a single fact in support of Dr. Dess's opinion. Well, that's not right, that there wasn't a single fact. However debatable it may have been, that wasn't an accurate statement. She goes on, saying, "How dare you submit such bullshit to a court of law? How dare you challenge me to try and grasp the concepts herein when there's not a single concept within?" Well, again, this is exaggerated. It is not an accurate statement that there is no concept there. It is an emotional, flamboyant, angry outburst put in print. Another example of this kind of histrionic exaggeration is on page 3, where she says, "Mr. Broderick is and always has been an abusive, obnoxious, cold-hearted, detached father. The kids hate him." Well, wherever the truth may lie, that's not exactly right. Or on page, I believe this is 5, where she writes, "Mr. Broderick has never taken a summer vacation with his kids. 17 years, exclamation point." And then on the next page, she says, in fact, the same paragraph, "Mr. Broderick feebly attempted to perform for the court by taking them to Hawaii and on a motorhome trip, which they hated." Well, not only does she contradict herself, saying he never took them on a trip, and then pointing out he just did, but it shows that he's damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. If he doesn't take him on a vacation, then he's no good. If he takes him on a vacation, then he's no good, because he must have an ulterior motive. He can't win. She goes on to say, "I have 9 volumes of diaries listing times and dates Dan Broderick has terrorized his kids, physically and emotionally." Well, that's histrionic exaggeration. Whatever he may have did, he did not terrorize them physically and emotionally, or more to the point, the 9 volumes of diaries, which I've had occasion to review, do not contain 9 volumes of material about Dan Broderick physically and emotionally terrorizing his kids. They have 9 volumes of what Betty Broderick has to say about many things, but that isn't there. There's no physical, emotional terror filling 9 volumes. Or again, on page 11, "He left me with no money, in a leased car, leased house, both in his name." Not exactly a factually accurate account of what happened. Or, "He literally terrorized us." These reflect the kind of emotional exaggeration that I was describing. Page 13, "There is not a single fact against me as a mother." Page 14, "I am also the greatest mother to my 4 kids. There is not a single fact to deny that." Page 15, "Because of Mr. Broderick's legal maneuvers, I have been without any competent legal representation all along." There's blaming others for her not keeping any of the lawyers she hires. Page 16, Mr. Broderick forcibly took possession of my home, furniture, money, kids. It's histrionic exaggeration about him taking forcible possession of all of those things. Page 18. I had been forcibly kept from my children for over 1 year, and I had no legal representation. That's not exactly the way things were. Page 20. Yeah, 20. I will not march quietly to the gas chamber.
You know, okay, so Nancy goes, okay, shut up, right? And I was going to tell Nancy, no, we want him to keep talking, because the more he talks, the worse she looks. But this is the defense's case. He is making her look worse and worse. No, Nancy, you're fine. It just made me think. It got me to thinking, it's making her look worse. The more he talks, the worse she looks. This is her case in chief. And he is making her look worse and worse and worse the more he talks. This is not helping her. Why did they call this guy? Is this supposed to... Okay, so they've said personality disorders are not mental illnesses. This is her personality. So how does this help her? It doesn't. No, exactly, Nichelle. Exactly. This does not help her. Why did they call this guy?
Well, I don't think that was in anyone's proposal at the time. These are emotional, colorful outbursts that reflect anger, they reflect emotion, and they intend to have an effect on their audience, get everyone upset, let people know how mad she is. But they can't be taken for accurate accounts of historical truth.
Dr. DeFrancesca has testified recently that, according to her, from her review of the case material, everything was fine with the defendant before 1983. Do you agree with that position, Dr. Deeds?
Well,
Your Honor, I'm sorry.
I'll repeat the question. Dr. DeFrancesca has testified earlier that in her review of the case file materials, at least that she looked at, dying with the defendant before 1983. Do you agree with that position?
no, I don't think that's quite accurate.
Can you explain for us why that's not accurate?
Sure. Well, there's evidence of these same kinds of features being present before 93, although it's also the case that her life prior to 1983 hasn't been scrutinized in anything like the same detail, because it's in light of the custody, divorce, and homicide trials that her life's put under a microscope for recent years. So we have a lot of information about her recent history. Information does exist about her behavior before that time is consistent. There was an occasion, there's a passage in the Marriage Encounter book written in 1976. Where Mrs. Broderick wrote, "I've been attracted to and gotten to know what seems to be oodles of men of all types, sizes, and backgrounds. In most cases, after 5 minutes, I have no use for these people. In some cases, it takes quite a while before I write them off as no use to me." Well, that's a statement of someone who uses people. Her assessment of men she meets is, are these people of use to me? That's a posture, not a rare one, but a posture that people take when they are interpersonal.
Okay, that guy that's questioning him, That's Betty. I mean, that's the state's lawyer. But this, we are on the defense's case. So he was called by the defense. So this is cross. Unless, I don't think they haven't started a rebuttal case. So we're still on the defense's case. So the defense called him.
Personally exploitive. How can I use this person? Another example is in 1986, I mentioned earlier, she wrote in the same book that she needs admiration. Or when she wrote that what she loved most about.
I'm pretty sure. But he is not, this doesn't sound like a cross though, because he's talking too much for this to be a cross. No, I'm not so sure. I think we're still on the defense's case though. See, y'all, now I'm questioning myself. Yeah, we're on the defense's case.
Dan was how much he loved her. That is, finding the reflection of her glory in his face is, again, evidence of narcissism from before 1983. Locking Dan out of the house, criticizing him in front of other people are examples of her having lack of empathy and perhaps narcissistic rage at that time. Her throwing things, scratching and digging in her fingernails are examples of times she could be in a narcissistic rage. To the histrionics, statement about the oodles of men is a histrionic-like way of phrasing things, but her threatening divorce when things weren't going just her way in the marriage is a histrionic thing to do. Her writing back in '76 that she likes to do what she feels like when she feels like. Again, evidence of her having that histrionic propensity even then. And I've no doubt that if the depth of investigation of her life from that earlier period were to produce as much data as from the later period, that we'd find lots more evidence. That assertion comes from the fact that these things don't have their onset in the 30s or 40s. These conditions have their onset probably in early childhood and always by the end of adolescence, early adulthood.
Now, were you aware that Dr. DeFrancesca diagnosed the defendant as being a borderline personality disorder?
Yes.
Do you agree with that diagnosis?
Well, I don't think the evidence supports it, though there are some features that are consistent with it and reasons why it's right to consider whether the evidence supports it. She has some of the sorts of behaviors that make one wonder if she has that.
What is a borderline personality?
Borderline personality disorder is a pattern, again, with criteria listed in DSM-3R, in which the essential ingredients, the things that must be present, are that there be a pervasive, long-standing pattern of unstable mood, of unstable relationships with other people, and of self-image. Those are the major things that must be true. Now, the unstable mood is something that it shares with histrionic. The shifting emotions of the histrionic could also be seen as the unstable mood of the borderline. There's some overlap between those. The unstable interpersonal relations in borderlines tend to be very pronounced, and it's one of the features that marks them, in that most clinicians have the view, I believe, I certainly do, that it's difficult for anyone to get along with a borderline personality disordered person for very long because the relationships become so unstable. These people are typically in and out of marriages constantly. Often there's a great deal of substance abuse or other highly impulsive destructive acts. They will sometimes be in and out of seemingly intimate relationships within a week, may have several people with whom they have intense, passionate affairs, and then it's broken off. Very dramatic extremes. And they're often described by those who know him as being like an emotional roller coaster. And because that is so very difficult to get along with, they do not often survive long in a stable relationship with anyone, which is one of the reasons I don't think that's applicable here.
You did say that the defendant did exhibit certain borderline traits.
Yes.
What were those that you saw in the case file?
Well, some particular traits that are more characteristic of borderlines than the other conditions. As I say, there's some overlap among these. There's some things that you could say it's a borderline trait, or maybe it's a narcissistic or histrionic, because they're all very related. But the things that are more borderline-like, for which there's evidence, are, and she does things in black or white. Sometimes this is referred to as an individual can be regarded by a borderline or someone who has this trait, which also occurs in narcissism, by the way, as being a very good person, somebody that's looked up to, admired, and respected, and then for some reason, good or bad, the reason could be trivial even, the person is suddenly denounced and is now regarded as the embodiment of all evil. And I think we see Mrs. Broderick doing that with Dan, as he went from being very highly regarded by her to being condemned and thought to be the root of all of her problems. That can be seen either as narcissistic rage, or if she were to go back and forth between those two states, it would be more like a borderline. If she were running back to him every few weeks saying, "I love you passionately, we have to be together again," and they got together for a week and then it fell off again. But she does tend to see things in black and white. She's dealt this way with her friends. She's dealt this way with family members. She's dealt this way with children. I think the second feature of borderline-like behavior that's most pronounced is one I've already talked about under other names. That's affective instability, her moodiness, her tending to respond emotionally. Histrionics do that, and they have these swings of emotions. Narcissists may do that too, though it's not one of the listed features. But in borderlines, one expects to see a lot of that. And so, once again, some of those examples could be called either way. I think on balance, though, when you look at all of the evidence and how her life has progressed, when you look exactly at what the criteria of DSM-3R specify, that the correct diagnoses were the ones that Dr. Goldspan rendered of histrionic and narcissistic.
Is the borderline personality disorder all that uncommon?
Many of us wish it were, because they're very difficult patients and they provoke so much trouble, but it isn't uncommon. It's become the most commonly diagnosed condition of the female college students who go to college mental health centers, for example. It's the bulk of their caseload these days.
Did you find in your complete review of the case file here any other significant personality traits that the defendant exhibited?
Well, there are quite a few examples of all of the, nearly all of the character traits described for that group of personality disorders that are in cluster B of the DSM-3R. The diagnostic manual divides the personality disorders into several clusters that are thought to be related to each other. The second one listed, there's A, B, C. The second one listed, has narcissistic personality disorder, histrionic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, and finally, antisocial personality disorder. I've already talked about the first three, but Mrs. Broderick also has a lot of the adult features of antisocial personality disorder.
Doctor, let's move on to Dr. DeFrancesca's diagnosis of the defendant was suffering from major depression recurrent type. Do you recall looking at the transcript and seeing her arrive at that diagnosis?
Yes.
And you recall her testimony regarding that?
Yes, I do.
Do you agree with that diagnosis?
No.
Why is that?
Well, there's several reasons why I don't think that the diagnosis is quite correct. The first is that none of the doctors who treated Mrs. Broderick diagnosed a major depressive illness. The doctor who knew her the best, Dr. Nelson, who treated her from early 1987 until July of 1989, testified that whatever depression Mrs. Broderick had didn't disable her and didn't make her inactive, and that the testing results, quote, showed no evidence of what we would call serious psychopathology, end quote. Moreover, Dr. Nelson saw her later in the latter part of 1989, just a month before the homicides, and he didn't find any major depression then either. Another reason is that Mrs. Broderick's diaries show times when she got upset for a day or two, but there were always obvious reasons for why she was getting upset. And the direction her upset took was not consistently depression or even a variation on the theme. That is, times she would be anxious, she would be angry, she would be what she characterized as hysterical. It's not often that she characterized herself as sad, though sometimes she said she was depressed. But more to the point, her diaries show these particular complaints to be fleeting. They didn't last long. She'd write about it for a day, sometimes 2 days in a row, then it wouldn't be there again, and she'd be back to talking about the other things. She'd have a day or two where she said she couldn't sleep, and then she'd make no mention of that for a while. Or she'd talk about a week when she gained some weight, and then that wouldn't be mentioned for a while. Or she'd talk about a time when she just didn't feel like doing much, but it wouldn't last long. A major depressive illness, that diagnosis, is only given when a particular set of signs and symptoms listed in the manual are present for a sufficient length of time. And the key is that the symptoms have to occur simultaneously. If someone has sleeplessness for a few nights one week, and the next week they gain weight, and the week after that they don't have any energy, and the week after that they feel sad, that isn't major depression. It all has to happen at once, and it has a period. Traditionally, the cutoff point was at least 2 weeks of feeling that way every day or nearly every day. We don't arbitrarily cut it off at exactly 2 weeks now, but the idea is there has to be a period of time where the person consistently feels this way. It can't just be that they had a bad day or that they had a lousy weekend. It has to be something more intense than that. Also, it used to be thought that we wouldn't even count it as major depression if it had an obvious cause. That's changed, and we recognize that sometimes people can get a biological illness of a major depression, even when there's some provocation, something that's making them that way. Still, getting upset for things that have an obvious cause for a day or two doesn't mean one has that illness. Normal people sometimes get upset when bad things happen in their lives. It doesn't mean they have a mental illness to get upset about things. At none of the times that we have data about Mrs. Broderick, either from observers of her or from her diaries, does she have enough of the symptoms simultaneously for long enough to qualify for a diagnosis of major depressive illness. And no one who saw her before the homicides ever said she did. Yet another reason is her functioning. And this goes to how bad any depression she had could have been. Because there's no doubt there were times Mrs. Broderick was depressed. Everyone who's seen her knows that there are times that she's been sad, times she's been depressed. Part of how we evaluate how severe a depression is to see whether it is this depressive disorder, the illness that I was just describing. But another way is to see whether the person can function. even while they have that. Someone who gets sad and still keeps up with their work isn't as depressed as someone who's too sad to go to work that day or to get dressed, and they're not as severely depressed as someone who has the psychosis that their body's rotting from the inside and they're about to die, which is what happens in the most serious depressions. There are different severities of depression, from simple sadness up to those very sick psychotic illnesses. Well, to look at how someone's doing, one thing is to look at their symptoms, and others to see how they're getting on in life, what their functioning is. In Mrs. Broderick's case, her functioning was such that even if she had a major depression, which I don't think is evidenced, at most it could be mild in severity because of the things she was still capable of doing. She ran an independent household, including shopping for herself and shopping for other people. She decorated her house, she decorated her condo, she traveled extensively. She remained very involved in the children's school. She served on social committees. She had cosmetic surgery. She explored career opportunities, including a legal or paralegal career, looking at working at the art gallery in La Jolla, considered opening a photography studio, a photography business. She served as president of the investment club. She became involved in a legal reform organization known as HALT. She spoke at public hearings. She gave numerous interviews with reporters. She maintained a stable and intimate relationship with a boyfriend. She wrote declarations that her lawyer drafted. She presented her own case in December of 1988. She planned camping trips with the boys, and she even wrote a book. That's functioning. That's getting on with life. That's doing things in the world, even if they weren't the things she most wanted to do. That's not the behavior of someone with a major depression who won't get out of the same pajamas or comb their hair day after day after day and week after week after week.
Doctor, do you recall Dr. DeFrancesca's testimony regarding depression on this masking concept, that sometimes the defendant would appear, quote, normal, but that was because she was masking her depression?
Yes.
Do you have any comments on that particular concept?
Well, there is such a thing as a masked depression, but most of the time that people don't look depressed, the explanation for that is that they aren't, not that they're masking it.
What about Dr. DeFrancesca's testimony that the defendant was consistently diagnosed in the past as being depressed by other mental health professionals? Do you agree with that position?
Well, as I said, everyone recognized there were times she was depressed, but no one ever diagnosed her as having a major depressive illness, as far as I could see, up until Dr. DeFrancesca did so, or at least up until after the homicides.
Does the evidence in your review of the entire materials of this case file show the defendant to have been suicidal when she was depressed?
It does not.
Can you tell us why that is?
Sure. Well, first of all, in many ways, Mrs. Broderick is too narcissistic to kill herself. She wouldn't want to spoil such a special and perfect thing as herself. It's difficult for narcissists to harm themselves because of the high regard in which they hold themselves. Secondly, there's no evidence that she ever attempted suicide. At the most, there is the phenomenon of histrionic gesture, in which she scratches her wrists and takes some pills about the house to call attention to being upset, and doesn't do anything that in fact could bring about death. Now, there are teenage girls who mistakenly think sometimes that taking certain kinds of medications that actually won't harm them may kill them. But Mrs. Broderick had been married to Dan during medical school, and she's an intelligent woman, and she knows what's capable of producing death and what isn't. So this is a histrionic gesture, not a suicide attempt to scratch her wrists and take some pills. She also said that she'd never kill herself and give Dan what he wanted. even when she was feeling her worst and listed various complaints in her diary, including going of what sort of things one's likely to complain about, what she didn't do is mention thoughts of suicide. And in fact, when one looks at the diary entries surrounding the times that she's said she was suicidal, there isn't any mention in the diary of her being suicidal at those times. A fifth reason is that her anger was always directed outward, much more than it was directed inward. She was very angry for a long period of time, but she made it rather clear to whom she was directing her anger, and it wasn't herself. Sixth, when she made threats, it was threats of homicide. She repeatedly threatened homicide, but she wasn't repeatedly threatening suicide. Seventh, she was recognized by others as being at risk of homicide, but not of suicide. In fact, even to the point that Dan and Linda hired guards at various points to protect them from her. And multiple people knew that she was at risk of killing them. Eighth, she'd shown some of the very specific signs of someone being dangerous to others, that is, warning signs of homicidal behavior, such as uttering threats to kill, not just when she was angry and emotional and being histrionic, but even when calm.
Okay. I was wrong. Judy was right, as usual. That's why I have a Judy. This is a rebuttal witness. I did not hear that the defense rested, and I did not hear that the prosecution was putting on a rebuttal case. I missed it. I don't know if it was said and I missed it or if they didn't say it. But yes, this is for the prosecution, which makes much more sense because this is not helping her. So, yeah, this is for the prosecution. This is the rebuttal. After the whole case is done, then they don't always take a rebuttal. They don't always do a rebuttal case, but the state then can go back and say, okay, we have an expert to refute your case or impeach your case or whatever. So that's what this guy is, and he's got a lot more parts. He talks quite a bit, and so far he's making her look like a loon. Which they keep saying personality disorders are not mental illnesses, and I don't really agree. I'm sure I have some personality disorders. I don't know what they are, but I guarantee I probably do.
Calm threats to kill are much more ominous and predictive than sort of hysterical outbursts. And she had made even calm threats. She'd also destroyed symbols of Dan, which is another one of the predictors of who was likely to kill another person. She had defaced a photograph of Dan. She'd burned his clothing. Those are symbolic moves of the kind that we've learned through research. I happen to do research on that phenomenon, are predictive of violence toward other people. And she had even assaulted Dan's home with her vehicle, which caused him to emerge where she could engage him in face-to-face combat. Those are behaviors predictive of violence toward others, not predictive of violence towards oneself. A ninth reason is that even in her book, which she claims was written when she was suicidal, she doesn't make any mention of being suicidal. And on the contrary, what she wrote was, quote, "If this is the way domestic disputes are settled in the courts, is there any wonder there are so many murders?"
Whoa!
So, in contrast to her saying she was suicidal, what she implies was she realizes that murders grow out of events like these. And the 10th reason is that she committed homicide, not suicide.
Doctor, you testified that personality disorders such as narcissism and histrionic personalities developed in late adolescence. Is that correct?
That's right. Or at least by then. That is, they may well be firmly fixed by age 3 or 4 in the eyes of some of the people who've studied this, but they're at least in place by late adolescence or early adulthood.
Are these personality disorders caused by, let's say, a bad marriage
No,
or a spouse having an affair
no.
or a divorce?
Well, maybe of one's own parents plays a part in it.
You're talking about during or before adolescence, I assume.
Right.
And what is the main difference between personality disorders and somebody who's, let's say, has a psychotic mental illness?
Well, in a psychotic mental illness, individuals have one of the symptoms of psychosis by definition. You can't have a psychotic mental illness unless you have either hallucinations or delusions or a thought disorder. Now, hallucinations are things like hearing voices or seeing things. They're perceptions that are not true. Mrs. Broderick never had any hallucinations, and no one has ever said she did, to my knowledge, not in any of the materials I've seen. Delusions are such features as patently false or absurd beliefs, believing that the planes flying overhead are giving one a particular set of messages about when the Martians are going to invade. That's a delusional belief. Mrs. Broderick's never had any delusional beliefs in the opinions of anybody who has dealt with her in any of the materials I've had occasion to look at. And the third feature of a psychotic illness is that of a disorder of the form of thought. Now that's a technical phrase that refers to having one's thinking so disturbed that it's impossible for the person to really communicate meaningfully with other people. So, for example, someone who can only speak in rhymes and riddles and no one can understand what they're saying may have a serious thought disorder.
Shocko
Or
when the walls
the
fell.
individual who
It's a Star Trek reference.
can only communicate with special words that they make up, or who's always making up words, can have a thought disorder. There are lots of other ways in which thought disorder happens, but there's no evidence Mrs.
Jill
Broderick
got
ever had
that.
one.
Anybody else got that?
The features of psychosis, of psychotic mental illnesses, are all those things that mean that someone's out of touch with reality because they're seeing things or hearing things, or they can't communicate with other people, or their beliefs are taken over by the mental illness. The mental illness interferes greatly with a person's life, and there's nothing they can do about it except get treated for it. Whereas in personality disorder, it's the pattern of behavior that is in conscious awareness. The individual knows what they're doing, knows why they're doing it, makes choices, makes their own decisions, plots their own course, and they're not ruled by it. That is, in personality disorder, the condition doesn't rule the person rules the condition, and they behave as they wish on purpose.
Doctor, does a personality disorder make a person crazy?
No,
Does it prevent a person from knowing what he or she is doing?
no, it doesn't.
Does it cause amnesia or to make the person forget things that they've done?
No, it doesn't.
Does it prevent a person from being deceptive?
From what?
From being deceptive?
No, it does not prevent that.
Does it prevent a person from planning things and acting according to that plan?
No,
And does it prevent a person from making choices of what course of conduct to take?
no.
Thank you, I have nothing further.
We'll take our recess, Mr. Rivera.
I can start either way, I don't care.
Let's take the recess. We'll take our afternoon recess at this time, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be in recess until 3 o'clock. Please remember the admonition.
So there's an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation where a whole race of aliens they only talk in is it it would be as if I think Dr. Crusher used the example, or Deanna, one of them. If you said Juliet on the back, they have on backing for looking for her, you would know because you know these aliens. They kept stuck with revolution. We don't know why the walls fell, so we don't know what it means. But like that would be the way we talk. Metaphors about like code or whatever. Entire it's just either a Disney reference, a Star Trek reference, or a Star Wars reference, or a Harry Potter reference. Y'all love me. You'll get used to it. You'll understand me eventually.
California versus Elizabeth Broderick. Court finds all members of the jury panel are present. All counsel are present. Mrs. Broderick is present. Dr. Dietz is back on the witness stand. You may proceed, Mr. Early.
Dr. Dietz, when part of your business is having a company that caters to stars in Hollywood, senators, people like that, is that not correct?
Oh, well, actually, more of the work is toward Fortune 500 companies, but occasionally I do work on behalf of Hollywood celebrities, and not senators, no.
Okay. Well, you also, there's some political figures that you have a company that holds itself out to, is that correct? For consulting?
I've done research on threats to political figures, and I suppose the only political figures that I've done consulting for have been judges. I don't think there are any other kinds of political figures.
Your Honor, excuse me, I think the microphone is turned off. Which needs to be plugged.
Oh. Thank you.
Mechanical engineer.
Sir, you list in your resume a number of cases that you've been involved in. Is that correct?
Yes, there's some
Cases that you've been involved in, is that correct?
those are the ones that are listed.
And you, in fact, as you do these cases, you use them as a form of a basis for you to give lectures and to be invited to places to speak on. Is that correct?
I've probably given half a dozen, maybe as many as 10 talks that involve some notable case or a notable case or another.
Okay. And at times when you take the cases, you know that they will become either parts of books or other writings of yours. Is that not correct?
There are times that I hope to use a case for case history of something I'm writing about, yes.
Okay, and that's before you testify even. Is that correct?
That I'd know that?
Yes.
Well, sometimes. I mean, for example, I'm not writing about anything this case is relevant to, but someday I might.
Now, at the time that you do get paid for your work, do you know?
Most of the time,
Okay, and you were paid on this case.
yes.
And were you paid a flat fee, an hourly fee?
An hourly rate.
And what was your hourly rate?
For Dr. Lipian's time, $125 an hour. For my time, $300 an hour.
Okay. Now, you've written articles before about psychiatrists and the different motives they have, whether they're retained or appointed, haven't you?
Yes.
Okay. And you wrote one in 1986, did you not? About doctors and the various, the way that things may affect how they look at cases based on whether they're retained, appointed, part of the system.
I think it was 1986.
Did I ever tell you guys the story about my nursing assistant thinking she saw a UFO one night? I was a charge nurse. So I was in charge, very, very young, 20-something, in charge of the whole nursing home. And my nursing assistant comes in and tells me there's a UFO. I teased her about this for, well, as long as I knew her. I've not seen her in years, but it was the very end of the night, and they were taking the garbage out. I don't think anybody was with her. I think she was by herself. She took the garbage out, and she comes running back in and says that there's a UFO out there. And I'm like, what are you talking about? There's a UFO. There's a UFO out there. So, of course, everybody wants to see the UFO. So we all go running out there to see the UFO. I'm like, where did you see it? I don't see anything. It was right there. Where? I don't see anything. Where were you when you saw it? I was taking the garbage out. It's right there. Where's the garbage? Did you put it in the dumpster yet? No, I dropped it when I saw the UFO. Where's the garbage? I don't know. I dropped it right there. It's gone. Oh my God, they took the garbage. It's like, okay, so you're telling me aliens came here to steal our garbage? I don't know, Debbie, but I know I put the garbage there and there was a UFO in the sky. I was like, I really don't think the aliens came to steal our garbage. So she eventually found the garbage that she dropped. We threw away the garbage, didn't see a UFO. And then we found out the next day because, you know, y'all, I told you I'm in like the Big Bend of Florida, and we're right on the Gulf of Mexico, or America, or whatever it's called now. And there's a weather balloon tethered off of Horseshoe Beach, which is probably a couple hours, maybe not even a couple hours, an hour, hour and a half north, maybe. And for some reason, I guess it was like really clear that night or whatever, and we could see the weather balloon. But by the time I had gone out there, I guess a cloud had gone in front of it or something, and we couldn't see it. But when she had gone out to take the garbage out, she could see it plain as day. And she swore that it was a UFO. It was the funniest thing. Because what was funny was they took the garbage. Why would they take the garbage? Shag Harbor. Oh, wow. Hey, Diana. I'm going to have to look that up. I saw one when I was a kid. You know how they say there's one that's like cigar-shaped, and then the other one is like, looks like a saucer. My mom and I saw this cigar-shaped one. When I came home from school, she told me about it, and I was like, yeah, right, Mom. And then that evening, we both saw it. But I believe in UFOs. I don't believe in aliens. I think that UFOs are like government experimental stuff. I don't know. I could be wrong. I don't know. But that's what I choose to believe. See, that's what I choose to believe. If it was like Star Trek where we could like become friends and allies with other species, that would be cool. But I really don't think there's other races on other planets like that.
Write about how some of the market forces provide incentives.
Okay. And you wrote then that private psychiatrists can charge anywhere from $125 to $200 an hour. Those are the figures you use. Is that correct?
I don't recall. It may be. That sounds what the rates had been at that time.
Okay. And so the rate since 1986 now is gone from
up to your rate of $300 an hour.
No, it's actually gone up higher than that.
Now, at the time that you were reading a number of passages from Elisabeth Broderick's writings as examples of her behavior, is that something that you can almost pick out of anybody? You can take one of their writings and probably pick out an example of what kind of behavior they might have?
You couldn't pick examples of those conditions out of just anybody's writings, but you could, out of anyone's writings, look for examples of personality disorder features and maybe find them.
Now, at the time that you pick out examples, the best way to do that so someone understands what someone's to talk about is sometimes to give context to what we're talking about. Isn't that right? When you try as a professional to give context to why someone might give a certain answer. Isn't that right?
Sometimes it's needed to clarify it.
In the marriage encounter, there is various questions that are asked of the people, and then they're required to give answers as part of the marriage encounter. Isn't that correct?
Some of the format was questions and answers, yes.
So, for instance, where you said that Gabe is part of her personality disorder before 1983, and you were talking about people seem to envy us. The question that was asked is, what do I like about best about us? Isn't that correct?
Yes, that's what I think I testified to.
She also talked that they have nice kids. Is that correct in that answer?
I don't remember what the other four were, but there were four other things, I think.
They talked about that we're both smart. We both work hard. Those were other things that she said that they liked about us. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Those are all things that you would say are either narcissistic, histrionic, or antisocial, those answers?
No, I thought those answers were true.
Okay. So the fact that you were able to pick out one answer and say that somehow, and you didn't think that it was true that people seem to envy them?
That might be true, but I also think that liking that is one of one's most valued traits. It reflects something unusual. People like having the things that would be envied, but liking being envied is not an ordinary trait.
Did you happen to read the whole marriage encounter?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. Now, she talked about her weak points in there, did she not? She gave some indications of where her weak points, is that right?
I recall something of that, yes.
Okay, she didn't see herself as perfect.
That's correct.
Okay. I'd like to ask you about this passage, and you tell me what this shows as her being the points that show that she is narcissistic and histrionic as a disorder in 1983. Darling Dan.
Objection, Your Honor, if it was not a passage that was referred to or relied upon in forming the basis of his opinion, that's inappropriate.
Well,
Just simply read it.
Sustained at this point, show if relied on it.
Was there parts of the marriage encounter that you just threw out and said, since they don't prove my point, they're irrelevant? Or did you look at the whole marriage?
Mr. That's inappropriate.
Okay, I'll ask the questions, Your Honor. Did you look at the whole marriage encounter and consider the whole marriage encounter, or did you only pick out parts of it and say, these are the only parts to me that are relevant?
I read the entire thing and I looked to see if there were examples of any of the characteristics of psychopathology.
And did you feel that the whole marriage encounter showed at least what her personality or how she thought about herself? Or are you saying that you were able to pick out just one or two lines in abstract and that the rest didn't tell you anything?
Well, I wasn't asked to address the life and times of Mrs. Broderick, only whether she had mental conditions.
Well,
And so that's what I, of course, looked for. But I did read it all, and I think that it did give a fair accounting of how she wanted to present herself to her husband at time.
Okay. And so by reading the marriage encounter, you would get, at this point in time, you didn't believe that was on her mind. In other words, you didn't think that she was writing this for this trial.
No, I thought she was writing it for Dan and for the sake of their marriage.
Okay. So it would tell you something about reading it, about how she, if I withdraw the question, you indicated that that now if we could look back and we could find some writings of hers, we would then know what she was like as a person. We would have more scrutiny. This was a writing of hers done pre-1983, is that correct?
That's true.
Okay. So in here, by going through the passages, we would have some idea of what she was like as a person when she wouldn't have necessarily the motives she even had in 1985 or 86 when she's looking at a divorce. Would you agree with that?
I think it would give you a very good view of how in 1976 Mrs. Broderick wished to appear to her husband.
Okay. I'm going to read you then this passage. It occurs to me how long it's been since we have written letters, and I like them so much, both to write and receive them. I'm really liking this weekend. We've been so right in the past, recognizing what's wrong with us. We're so smart about that, but it seems we cannot go beyond that, and I hope we will start to now. I love the part about the opposite of love is indifference. We never hated each other, but we have, or at least I feel you have been guilty of the opposite of love, and it really hurts. Do you feel an accurate representation of what she's like? Or is this part of the histrionic or narcissistic personality?
I think that that's a genuine statement, if that's what you're asking, that she finds herself feeling hurt when he seems indifferent to her. Now, what would have to do with her personality makeup would require, on a point like that, knowing whether objectively he was being indifferent. If she perceived it as indifferent, even when what he was doing most people would perceive as warm and sensitive and generous, then that could be reflective of her excessive need for attention, that what for most people would be thought warmth, to her seemed indifferent.
You read his marriage encounter, didn't you?
No, I didn't.
You didn't read his at all?
No.
So when you were given these volumes of books and paper, that part never was given to you and you never requested it?
By the time I knew it existed, I already knew that I'd been, that there was a ruling that I already knew what the limits of my testimony were going to be, and that they would not be including.
When did you get involved? When did you get involved in this case?
Many months ago.
Before the trial began?
Oh, yes.
And when did you get this material?
The marriage encounter book?
No, all of these transcripts of the last trial.
The transcripts of the last trial, again, many months ago.
Before the trial began?
Yes, that's right.
And the marriage encounter was mentioned in the last trial, was it not? And it actually read to the jury, or the jury read it?
Objection irrelevant.
Oh, Rhodes can answer that, if you remember.
I don't remember, but I knew that there were lots of writings by her and had lots of those. I didn't know of the separate thing called the marriage encounter book until quite recently.
Okay, so you didn't read the whole trial transcript. Sometimes your associate did that?
I don't think he read the entire trial transcript either, only the testimony of particular witnesses, the ones that were mentioned before. And as to which of us read which parts, I'm not sure I could even reconstruct all that now.
Did the both of you together read the whole trial transcript, or was just you focused in on particular witnesses?
I know that I read all of the testimony of the mental health professionals, and I know that I read all of the direct and cross-examination of Mrs. Broderick. I think that it was Dr. Lippian who first summarized the testimony of Kim and Lee Broderick,
Did you read any of the other witnesses that were called to trial?
I don't recall reading any of them, no.
Did you recall reading any testimony of friends and acquaintances of Elisabeth Broderick?
No, only the ones that I listed before.
Did and you say that you were told that you didn't read one marriage encounter because you didn't think that it was going to come into evidence?
Your
No.
Honor, that's misleading. He's been limited to what he can express an opinion.
Just go on to another area, Mr. Okay. The she goes on to say, this is all true. Now, I don't know what else to say except I love you and I hope we can accommodate each other better. One of the big hurdles I'm up against is your refusal of the need to share. I really think all people do, but you're saying that you don't. Now, is her need to, at least her expression of a need to share, is that something that's narcissistic, histrionic?
Not of itself, no.
This has got to be a mutual type of fulfilling each other's needs, but you keep saying you don't have these needs, which I believe. But in a way, I feel sorry for you that you don't open yourself up to some wonderful happiness. I think your self-image is so guarded that you're not living life and enjoying it to the fullest. Is that something that is her narcissism or her histrionics at that time?
Not unless it's misleading.
You read some quotes about her feelings about her being the center of attention. Did you did she talk about things that she needed that were important to her, like listening to people, writing "Don't interrupt at all," "Don't comment," "Don't shift eyes on position," "Don't be assured you know what's coming"? Did she talk about needing to listen to other people's feelings?
I read that, but I couldn't tell from the context whether this was advice given to everyone about how to be a better listener, or whether this was someone's critique of her and she was trying to learn how to develop empathic listening skills that she lacked. I couldn't tell. It looked like an exercise program to me.
When you talked about someone that would need to be the center of attention, she writes, at first it sounds trivial, but when I really think about it, you are the most important person I have in the whole universe, bar absolutely none, and I'll be lost without you. That's the person who feels that that the world evolves around them. That's what she's saying.
She is expressing her dependency and seeking to make it plain to her husband that he's important to her.
She talks in there about feel like I'm living in a very bad Del Mar fog, or that snowstorm we drove through once, like speeding along, not seeing what is ahead, anticipating a terrible thing to happen to us at any second, losing touch with the world, unable to cling to anything secure. I like the sunshine and I long for the clarity and predictability and security in our lives. Now she's talking about their lives together. Was that someone who was only using that relationship as she would in her borderline personality or in her narcissistic personality?
Someone who is expressing feelings of insecurity and seems to sense that the marriage was in trouble even then.
Now, you indicated that she was somebody who would want to be in command, and problems with that. Is that something that you would see with somebody who's narcissistic, wanting to be in control?
I don't understand the question.
Well, is part of narcissism wanting to be in control?
Not necessarily.
Okay. Is there anything that you saw about her that she needed to be in control of things?
I think there's some indication of that, yes.
Okay. Now, needing to have some control over your life, that's not necessarily bad, is it?
No.
Okay. And in a marriage, when somebody is making decisions on what furniture they buy, what they're going to spend money on in the house, does that show a disorder because the other spouse would like to be involved in that?
No.
You read one line out of the cases out of the marriage encounter in regards to her using people. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. Now, that was actually a whole thing that she wrote, a whole letter, and that was just one line in the middle, isn't that correct?
I think it was more than one line. You're talking about the oodles of men?
Yes.
quotation?
Yes.
But it was just one part of a larger piece.
Okay. And what she wrote is, I feel concerned that you are falling prey to such trivial strokes, as you call them, from people who mean nothing to you. You react to the smallest thing. When people that mean everything to you try to give you strokes, you slough them off and don't react. I too fall for the trivial ones, and they are really fun to get, but I also know from experience, which I think you lack, that you are unique in the world. We used to marvel that we thought the same thought at the same second. I've been attracted to and gotten to know what seems to be oodles of men of all types, sizes, and backgrounds. In most cases, after 5 minutes, I have no use for these people. In some cases, it takes quite a while before I write them off as no use to me, but the first moment I saw you, I liked you. Spoke to you, it stayed. Wrote to you, it grew. Dated you, got only better and better. No one else I've ever met before or since was as right as you. I really value that and recognize that you cannot be easily or at all replaced. Trivial strokes are fine, but I can't do without the real ones. You seem to think they're interchangeable. Thought, writing and receivers was a tremendously important factor in the development of our love. I think we both enjoyed it. I know I did, and I look very much forward to resuming the practice. Now, when people date, often they meet a number of people, and after a while, they find out that they're either shallow or they don't like them or there's nothing there, and they move on. Is that correct?
Sure.
And you feel that what she's doing is saying here that she just rejects, just uses people and casts them away, rather than, you don't think this letter says that when I found something that was important to me, I formed a strong bond. You don't feel it says that. This letter represents to you her feelings that she rejects, just uses people and throws them away.
Well, I think primarily that letter shows her to be a normal person, as she is most of the time in most ways. There isn't that much wrong with her. On the other hand, even in the midst of this predominantly normal letter written to her husband, she makes what I would regard as an error in her intention to communicate how special he is and how perfect and unique their marriage is, when she conveys to him the fact that he's only one of oodles of men she's been attracted to, most of whom she's discarded as of no use. because the inference that might be drawn from that is that she concluded he was of use to her.
So that's what you think, that's how you read that letter, that really what it is a slap in his face and telling him that.
No, I think it's meant to be an endearing, enchanting, you're my most special person letter. She happens to reveal herself a little more than might have been effective there.
The, you talked about some of her needs in those personality as use of people. In other words, she would do things that are only good for her. That's how she perceives the world, is as if it's good for her, then that's how she does that.
Those aren't the only things she would do, but often her priorities reflected putting her needs, and in fact the needs reflecting these traits I've talked about, ahead of other priorities. But that isn't all there was to her. Most of the time she was behaving normally.
Well, she talked about needing a vacation in her marriage encounter, did she not?
Yes.
Where she says, I've been pestering for a long time that I need a vacation. Then what she says is, what I meant was I need to get you away from TV and work and Barlotta and booze to get you back to me. This has sort of fulfilled that, but I still need to have a family time. It could happen in our home if we could just turn off everything else and just being a lovely family for 2 days or a week or 2 weeks without any worldly obligations or duties for any of us. It would be so relaxing and worthwhile, and we all need it. Maybe something you can relate to better is we need a sofa. Nothing else for our house. Everything else, and there's lots we want. We need a sofa so you and I can be physically close in the evenings and share the day's events and feelings so that we can go in bed in love. Not what we have now. By the time we go to bed, I'm full of resentment for the lack of closeness and communication during the evening. How can we make love to that? Now, when you're talking about her look for ideal love, is that what you were talking about?
You didn't read it accurately. The end of that quotation is, how can I make love to that?
Okay.
That, for the most part, is a statement of how of very good ideas for the marriage. Those are fine things that would help many marriages. But what she ends with is a dehumanizing statement about Dan. She goes too far. It sounds sweet and sensitive and very nice up to that point.
So you would read into that when she talks about how they can improve their marriage, you read into that that's the sign of her disorders.
No, I think mostly it's normal and a good idea. I think a lot of marriages could profit from that kind of vacation and from planning the furniture so that if they're going to watch TV, they sit together. Those are good ideas. It's smart. And I didn't rely on that as evidence of pathology. However, when you look at the last sentence...
Okay. This might be a TMI, but y'all were very admirable about my relationship with Travis, as we talked about yesterday afternoon. Travis and I don't like to watch the same things on TV. He comes home. I'm usually sitting here when he comes home. Or even if I'm not, even if we're done for the day, and I've cooked his dinner, and we sit down to dinner together, Then he goes and takes a shower. He goes to the living room. He watches what he wants to watch. I go to the bedroom or sit here and watch what I want to watch. And then sometimes I'll see something I want to talk to him about, or he'll see something he wants to talk to me about. And we'll go and talk to each other. And then we'll go back to our respective places, me in the bedroom, him in the living room. We rarely watch TV together. And then we go to bed. We sleep in each other's arms every night. We've been married for 18 years. It has nothing to do with how much you sit. How close you sit to each other. It's what you decide to do with your marriage. So, how close you are at night in your bedroom has nothing to do with where you sit on a couch together. That is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. Yeah. Exactly. Travis watches, and sometimes there'll be one that catches my eye, and I'll sit down and watch it with him. He watches people at water parks because he loves water parks. He watches people doing stuff in RVs, going around to RV parks and stuff. Occasionally he will watch people shopping for RVs, and I'll watch that with him a little bit. Not like hours and hours like he does. He watches people on four-wheelers, like off-roading, which I like, but not like hours and hours. You know, I'll sit down and watch maybe an hour or so with him. Cruises. Now he's into watching people on cruise ships. I don't even. Because if we're going to do that one day, we're going to do it one day. Let me be surprised. You watch a cruise ship. If we get tickets to a cruise ship, then I'll sit down and watch it so I can kind of plan out what we might do on a cruise ship. But no, not all couples like to sit and watch the same things together. That doesn't mean that you don't cuddle when you go to bed at night. That's ridiculous. And then there are couples that don't like to even touch each other when they sleep, and that's okay too. It has nothing to do, I shouldn't say it has nothing to do with physical intimacy, but I told him, Judy, I warned him, he still wants to go. I warned him. But you know what? You know what'll happen? He won't get sick. I'll be the one that will be puking in the bathroom the whole trip. And I'll be like, Judy warned us and you made me go. I mean, it is about physical intimacy too, but it doesn't have to be if he's not gonna touch you when you go to bed, it has nothing to do with the fact that you weren't sitting next to each other on a couch while you watch TV, okay? She's oversimplifying marriage here by, if we could only sit on the couch together, everything would be fine. No, that's BS.
It is a little troublesome that even as she tries to convey such very nice and sensitive and caring ideas, in comes the hostility of how can I make love to that?
And the purpose of going to the marriage encounter was to make the marriage better, is that correct?
Objection.
This witness says no way.
Sustained.
You have no, did you read Elisabeth Broderick's testimony about why they went to the marriage encounter?
Yes.
Okay. Now, when somebody is narcissistic and histrionic, you would expect that your diagnosis of the things that you would see You might see self-importance, is that correct? If someone who is narcissistic, there's a lot of, one of the things you say is that there's self-importance.
People who are narcissistic often feel self-important. That's
They're concerned, for instance, about how people are going to perceive them when they're dead and gone, how people are going to look at them, how they want to, how other people perceive them. In other words, what face they're putting on and how people are going to look at it.
yes, that's right.
People who are narcissistic are rules a lot of times. Isn't that correct? They want to have wealth.
In 1991 in America, that's a very common way it's displayed. Yes.
Okay. Well, if someone is narcissistic when they're younger, it might have to do with wealth. Only wanting a sofa is not wanting lots of material wealth, is it?
Wanting a sofa? No.
Okay. Now, you mentioned something about a threatening letter from Elisabeth Broderick and what she read into that letter. Remember that?
Yes.
That testimony? Obviously, what people read into things in relationships, a lot of times depend on what the relationship there is, what they have between them. Isn't that correct? Am I making sense to you at all?
Sometimes.
Okay. It's probably my narcissistic tendency.
I'm not making any diagnosis.
They're not making any sense. But that, in other words, some people have the experience that you can go see your mother for Thanksgiving and all she has to do is say 2 words and you can come off the chair because you know the whole history of the words. And everyone else looks at you and says, what a nut. He screamed and yelled at his mother and she only said 2 words, or she only said, aren't you going to eat the potatoes? Now, sometimes when you're judging how people react to things, you're judging the history. You have to know some history behind them. Is that correct?
That can be true.
Okay. So when somebody looks at somebody who might be in a relationship where the person can say things very nicely, if it's a domineering, controlling relationship, they might respond knowing some history of what that person really feels like. I mean, what's important to them, what's not. Would you agree with that? That might bring out. Someone might read something that to you might be innocuous, to them might have lots of meanings because of the way the person has dealt with them in the past.
Yes.
Okay. So for instance, did you see photo number 69, which is Dan Broderick's house?
I'm not sure. May I see it? Yes, I can.
Okay. And you don't know, did you know whether the one thing that Elisabeth wanted out of the marriage encounter, whether that was something that Dan ended up with, the couch?
Objection as to what they ended up with. That's irrelevant.
Overruled, your answer to that.
Do you know whether that's something that ended up happening? If you do or you don't, I don't know.
I'm not sure what you're asking, but I don't know if one of those couches is the one that came from the encounter request.
Did you read the diary entries that talked about where Betty wrote in her diaries about Dan demanding lists and Dan wanting things and her saying, I keep giving him the list and he keeps writing me these letters asking where they are? He won't talk to me?
Excuse me, I would ask if he's going to confront the doctor with certain diary pages, you get the diary page and show them to the doctor.
This is cross-examination.
See if you recall that.
Do you recall that?
What was the question again?
Do you recall in some diary pages where Betty was talking about the fact that she gives Dan the list that he asked for and he doesn't respond to her?
I recall talking about lists. I don't recall the particular passage.
Now, when you read the diaries were in fact 9 volumes, isn't that correct?
Yes.
And Elisabeth Broderick's writing changed dramatically from over that. When you look at the diaries and go from the beginning of the diaries to the end, there's some dramatic changes in her style of writing, is there not?
From time to time there are, yes.
Okay, and near the end of the diary, it gets to be where it's a lot bigger, her handwriting. In fact, some pages she might only have 4 words on a page, isn't that right?
There are times it's that way.
And there are times when, do you know are you familiar with how she wrote the diaries?
I believe I know what she said about that.
Okay, and what's your understanding of what she said about that?
That at various times she has said that she began making what she considered journals at the advice of an attorney. She couldn't recall most of the times. She said that an attorney advised her to do it, which attorney it was. I understand that some of the entries were made contemporaneous with the events being described, and that others were made retrospectively. That is, some were made the very day things happened or soon thereafter. Some were made at vastly different times. Inserts were made, additions and changes were made, and the intention was not so much to be a running account of the current events, but rather to try to create a document that would contain a great deal of information so it wouldn't be lost.
And a lot of it was about, not necessarily about her day-to-day feelings, but about what was happening in the divorce, wasn't it?
Yes.
Okay, and did you ever look to see how many times she would have consecutive days written down? Was it a lot of the time or very little where you would be able to look at 1 month and have January 1st, January 2nd? Or was that very unusual to have that?
There weren't too many times where one had entries many days in a row.
In fact, most of the time there was very little time where you had exactly daily entries. Most of them were interspersed with going back months that were missing.
Yes, that's right.
And the diaries ended in 1988, didn't they?
Yes.
So you weren't able to tell anything after 1988 as to how she felt about certain things, from the diary entries anyways.
Not from diaries, that's right.
Okay. Now, you talked about some of the things that she had rages about. Again, sometimes you have to put things into context to understand why someone might be angry about certain things. Isn't that correct?
Yes, that is sometimes necessary.
Okay. And you alluded to the Danny tapes and some things that were happening with Ruth Roth and her feelings about that. Did you, from her diary, were you aware at the time that she was supposed to have her children over Easter that her brothers and cousins and their families came to visit and were staying at her house and she was planning a vacation with the whole family?
I know there was such a time. I don't know what year you're talking about, though.
Okay. And you know that at the last minute at that time that she was told that she was not going to have her children with her family that had come from back east to visit?
I know about an occasion where that's what she says happened to.
Okay. And you knew that that was something that, again, to look and say why a person might be angry or upset, or why they might feel a certain way about something, of course you have to put that in context, do you not?
Depends on what it is you want to know about it.
Okay. Well, obviously, when you talk about someone having some kind of rage, there are times when people have rage for no reason at all. There's other times that people are very upset because things happen that that are unwarranted, let's say, or they think are unwarranted.
Yes, there are many reasons people get angry.
Okay. You went through a number of things about Elisabeth Broderick going through the fact of that she was looking for Dan and Linda about what their lifestyle was, and talked about being about envy, and this shows how bad she was in, or at least how strong her disorder was.
Objection, you have misstates the testimony.
Your Honor, I thought we had an agreement.
Mr. Burkhouse, supposed to the objection.
If the doctor understands it, I don't have any objection to the answer.
Go ahead.
Do you understand it, or is this another one of mine?
Next time I may come in.
When you were talking about some of the examples for the symptoms of her disorder, you were talking about her fixation, it appeared to be, and maybe I'm using the wrong term, on how Dan and Linda were living, finding out about them. Remember that?
Yes.
Okay. Now, did you take into account at all that at the divorce proceedings at some point in time, she was told that the comparative lifestyles were going to make a difference on how much money she got. In other words, if she could live on $500 a month, that's what she would get. If she could live on $2,000 a month, that's what she get.
I knew that.
Okay. So you knew that that was an issue, is that right?
I knew that she had said that Mr. Hargreaves told her that that was an issue.
Now, you also, when people, the way people react to situations, the situation itself can exasperate that, can exasperate their personality, can it not?
The situation they're in?
Yes.
You bet.
Okay. By the way, you said that you talked to Dr. Goldspan and you read his testimony. Is that correct?
Yes, and I also read his notes.
Do you remember reading in his testimony where he said it was totally improper to read DSM-3 as part of the legal proceeding?
I remember what he said about it. It came from the caveat at the front of the book, and it doesn't say that. What he said was that there is a caveat at the beginning, which I think both he and I helped draft, as a matter of fact, indicating that the reliance for legal purposes is one of the areas about which there's controversy. But he didn't say that reading it was improper.
When you do interviews with people, do you, sometimes you do as part of your exam, sometimes you interview people and sometimes you don't, is that correct?
When I do
As far as
evaluations-
forensic testimony, sometimes you interview the people, sometimes you don't.
That's correct.
And I take it from what you said in this case, you felt that since you had some diagnostics, some other people had interviewed Elisabeth Broderick, and there's a lot of material, you felt confident in being able to give your testimony.
I felt it was possible to reach these kind of conclusions on the basis of the evidence available.
Okay. Now, when you interview somebody, do you normally go through the events, including what got them into court?
If that's what I'm asked to evaluate, that's not what I was asked to address here.
Well, what criminal cases have you been involved in where you've interviewed the defendant and have not gone through the crime?
Probably 1,000 cases where I interviewed the defendant on an issue of competence to stand trial and was specifically asked not to evaluate him at the time of the crime.
Well, when you're talking about, those are issues of competence to stand trial. How many times have you not talked to them about the crime when your testimony is not about competence, but about the issues surrounding the crime itself?
I think we have a sidebar.
No, it's all right, you can answer that.
How many times have I not talked to them about the crime?
When your
when the
testimony is
issue-
yes, maybe if I withdraw the question. Do you normally interview them about the crime when your testimony is such as you have here, when you're talking about these issues that we have here?
Such as here, this is not something I ordinarily do. My most common role for the last 10 years in criminal trials is talking about mental state at the time of a crime. And of course there, wherever possible, I will interview defendants about the time of the crime and their mental state. There's some circumstances where that can't be done, but that isn't my role here.
So that's your understanding of the law, that your job as a forensic psychiatrist is to testify about someone's mental state at the time of the crime?
No, that's my understanding of one of the most frequently asked questions brought to me in the cases I accept.
Or are you aware in California that you cannot do that?
That's not true. Where there's a defense of insanity, one can do that.
Well, when there's no defense of insanity. Have you testified before where there's no defense of insanity?
Yes.
Okay, and are you aware that you cannot testify about the elements around the crime? Mental
Exactly.
states
That's why I
around-
haven't, and why this isn't an example of what I usually do.
So in those, well, for instance, in the Bardo case, you testified in the Bardo case, didn't you?
Yes.
And the Bardo case didn't involve insanity, did it?
No.
And you interviewed him about the crime itself, did you not?
Yes.
Now, did you talk to Dr. Goldspan about his interview with Elisabeth Broderick about the crime itself?
I believe Dr. Goldsband found himself in a similar position in some respects.
Well, Dr. Goldsband talked to Elisabeth Broderick, didn't he?
Yes.
And are you aware of any restrictions on what he could talk to her about? Were you aware that he was under any restrictions? Did he tell you he was under any restrictions about what he could talk to her about?
He did not tell me of restrictions. I have an assumption about what the defense was at the time and what he would therefore be free to do, but I don't in fact know.
So you thought, you made some assumptions that there was things he was restricted from talking to Elisabeth Broderick about?
I assumed that Dr. Goldsband evaluated her about those things he'd been asked to do. And what he's asked to do is a function of what his client asks him, which is a function of what defense you've entered.
Okay. Were you aware of any restrictions, or did he tell you of any restrictions he had about interviewing Elisabeth Broderick about anything? Don't you ask him, Nancy? Oh, cool.
I already said no.
When you went through, again, through narcissism, one of the things that you talked about was the rage and about Elisabeth Broderick throwing things. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, when somebody throws something in a marriage, when someone gets upset, does that mean they're narcissistic?
No, it could be an ordinary temper tantrum.
Okay.
It could be something more vicious than that.
Okay. Now, did you read Elisabeth Broderick's testimony in regards to the fact that, as to what she said about that incident?
I've read at least one account she gave that I can recall, yes.
Okay. And she talked about her son just being born, about still having staples in from an operation, about it being Dan being out with a friend of his, drinking and having a kid with him tonight. And
It's not legal either.
she was mad about that. Did you read that account?
Yes, that's not the one I was thinking of. I was thinking of the ketchup bottle throwing was just a joke account.
But did you read her account as to the, did you read the account that she had as to the, about being mad about him coming home late?
Yes.
And you found that to be a sign of her narcissism?
I didn't refer specifically to that incident. I had in mind the descriptions of her throwing ketchup bottles and the stereo.
Oh,
But that might be another example, depending on what she had in mind at the time.
what was the stereo incident about? I thought the stereo was about when she went out to a pizza parlor with Monahan and Dan Broderick. And children came home. What's your understanding that's a different incident?
I thought that was different from the Staples incident.
You would expect then that what you see here as far as narcissism and histrionic, the personality disorder, this is something that is, as you testified, early onset, is that correct? In other words, before in puberty you would expect, or at least in adolescence, you would expect that a person who has this disorder, they have it by then.
A person who has any of the personality disorders, our current understanding is, has developed that disorder by the time they've become adults. And most of us think that for most of the personality disorders, the onset is even before puberty.
Now, there are times that can personality disorders be manifested from what is not a disorder because of stress or other outward stressors?
Well, there are different ways of phrasing this or conceptualizing it, but what certainly is so is that events that occur may alter the course of an individual's behavior. all behavior is in response to the world.
Well, can you find someone who you would not characterize as having a personality disorder or one of these disorders and have them go through something very stressful in their life and come out after that with the symptoms of a personality disorder?
Who didn't have a disorder in the first place?
Yes.
No.
Is there any kind of diseases, mental diseases that you can get from outside stressors?
There aren't any mental diseases, but there are mental conditions.
Okay. Or what kind of mental conditions can you have?
Normal bereavement, getting sad for up to 6 months when someone dies. An adjustment disorder can occur when something goes wrong in life and someone gets upset for a time. Say someone's kicked out of college for using drugs, they can have an adjustment disorder and be depressed and angry and get into even more trouble for a period of time. Or if an individual gets beaten up and terribly bruised, they may have an adjustment disorder. Some traumas with particular features that are life-threatening, or where an entire community is wiped out, or where one sees a loved one who undergoes a mutilating death, can produce what's called a post-traumatic stress disorder. It can only occur with particular kinds of stressors, and there's specific symptoms and signs for that. In addition to those, there are a host of responses listed in DSM-3R that people can have to their environments that include such things as adult antisocial behavior. Sometimes people who seem to have a normal life suddenly embezzle large sums of money or murder someone or do other things unlike their past. That's a response to events that happened to them. So there are lots of different behaviors, some of them for which we have psychiatric names that are responses to the environment. None of them is a disease, however.
When they have you seen the studies on people who are the victims of abuse? When they are tested, they come out with showing disorders.
I'm familiar with many studies of different kinds of victims of abuse, some of which show that a proportion of people who are subjected to particular kinds of abuse, such as physical torture by renegade fascist police squads in South America, will have in a proportion of cases, a post-traumatic stress disorder. Some show brain damage, some show enormous physical injury, some have enough brain damage to cause them to be demented. If you look at battered women studies, a proportion of battered women will have a post-traumatic stress disorder. If you look at battered kids, for various kinds of abuse, we have data on how often it sometimes causes different disorders.
Well, they also find from battered women that the people will test out as having personality disorders unrelated to prior history. Or you disagree with that?
What are you referring to?
Yeah, have you read any studies that indicate that when people come out of abusive relationships that they can test as having disorders?
I don't know what you're referring to.
So you're not familiar with any studies?
I'm not familiar with any research that's ever shown that someone who did not have disorders before had credible evidence of disorders later, other than the kinds of things I was referring to.
And how about people that come out from hostage taking? Do any of those people ever show signs of disorders?
Objection, that's irrelevant. There's no proof of that.
Well, doctor, you indicated that people have to have a disorder in very early life, or there's no way that they would be diagnosed afterwards. Is that true under every circumstance?
That's true for personality disorders, which is what I said. There are other kinds of disorders that can be acquired, such as adjustment reactions, bereavement, criminality. These are things that one can first do in adulthood.
Do they show signs of schizophrenia or psychosis?
Does who?
People who come out of, for instance, concentration camps, or come out of hostage taking, or come out of sometimes abusive relationships.
Objection, sustained.
Will you find that sometimes the person's personality can be, certain facets of it can be highlighted or distorted because of things that happen to them?
Events can cause people to magnify their display of their pre-existing personalities.
Now, there were, you gave an indication of the difference between a clinician and somebody who's seeing someone forensically, that there's a different reason that you see them and things you talk to them about with.
That's right. The purposes of clinical and forensic work differ.
Okay. Now, a clinical, persons who are working clinical, they still do diagnosis, and those are still important, is it not?
Yes, though, even that has another purpose.
Okay. But it's not that, are you saying that if somebody was to do a diagnosis on axis 1 and 2 and 3, that a forensic psychiatrist will come out with a different diagnosis than a clinical psychiatrist?
Well, they may, but theoretically it should be the same. Since the purposes differ, the rules of evidence differ.
Okay. Well, there was a doctor, a psychiatrist that saw Elisabeth Broderick in a hospital setting over a 3-day period of time in 1986. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And he diagnosed her as having a bipolar disorder, did he not?
Not originally. Originally, he said she had an adjustment disorder. And then after he saw a computerized test printout, he changed his diagnosis, and one of them was bipolar that he gave. But it was clear that was based on the test results.
Well, wasn't there the first one an admitting diagnosis, and then wasn't there a diagnosis at the time that she left the hospital? A final diagnosis?
Right, but from the context, it's clear the first one was based on what he saw and knew and thought about her. And the second one reflected the influence of this computerized test result.
Okay, so you're saying that the doctor wrote a diagnosis, he came up with that she had what was his diagnosis on axis 1?
Yeah, this was Dr. Levinson.
Yes.
And originally what he wrote was axis 1, adjustment disorder of adult life.
That was when she was first admitted to the hospital.
This is the day after she was admitted for bashing in Dan's door.
Okay, but you know whether she was admitted to that hospital the first day or whether she was transferred there?
I believe she was transferred to that hospital.
And was there a final diagnosis done?
After the test results came back, and despite the letter from Dr. Nydorf saying not to rely on this test, the diagnosis was changed, and the final diagnosis was bipolar affective disorder.
Well, he just said not to rely on that test alone, didn't he?
Well, what he said was, Gary, since there was no history available from Ms. Broderick, it was impossible to answer referral questions on the basis of this one test. It may be unreliable.
And so what you're saying is this doctor did something that you feel is totally unreliable. In other words, he made a diagnosis that's an error.
No, it makes no difference. For clinical purposes, the purpose of diagnosis is to treat the patient so as to help relieve their suffering. Secondarily, there's the purpose of statistics in the hospital, record keeping, reports to insurance companies. But what really matters in the eyes of physicians everywhere is treating the patient. When you're seeing someone clinically, you want to help them. And the treatment plan is what makes the most difference. Does he get to the right treatment plan?
Well,
forensically, it's another matter. The truth is what matters. What's the process? What has occurred? What's the evidence for it? He's not held to those standards when he's doing this, especially when the patient's leaving the hospital and refusing treatment.
so you're saying it's not important if you go to a hospital that someone diagnose you correctly so that they're treating you for depression? That doesn't matter?
It's precisely why it does matter that you be properly diagnosed to be treated. But the rules of evidence don't matter. Getting the right treatment matters. She was leaving. She refused treatment.
So it's important for them to do a proper diagnosis to know what kind of treatment to give.
If they're going to treat.
And obviously, when you come to a forensic psychiatrist, the forensic psychiatrist comes in to advocate a position, is that correct?
I should hope not. No, the forensic psychiatrist comes in to answer a question. And the goal, and we don't always achieve it, but the goal we strive for, and what I've always tried to train my trainees to strive for, is to be as objective as one can and look at the evidence, see where the evidence leads one.
Okay. So the position of, well, you indicated that you testified in the Hinckley case.
Yes.
And in the Hinckley case, you worked on that for a year,
Right.
and you testified in that.
Yes.
And the jury received all your information, your testimony.
They received some of it.
And you feel that there was a lack of truth in that proceeding?
I don't think he said that here, and I don't know how relevant, so.
Sustained.
Well, in that case, your position was that the man didn't have a major mental illness, and that was rejected by the jury, isn't that correct?
Jackson,
No.
what happened?
Well, sustained. What happened there is not relevant to this case.
Now, Dr. Jacobson saw the Elisabeth Broderick, did he not?
Yes, he did.
Did he make any findings of any depressive disorder?
He didn't diagnose her as having a major depressive disorder.
Well, did he make any diagnosis with depressive disorder?
I don't recall. I'd have to look at that document. I don't have it with me.
Well, when you were looking to see if she had a depressive disorder, would it be important to see what other mental health experts had to say about that?
I did. I just don't recall what everyone had to say.
Was there anyone in the jail did you look at the jail notes?
Oh, excuse me. I do recall what Dr. Jacobson told your investigator. I just remembered the typo. Your investigator wrote that it was a psychothymic disorder. I believe that's a type for cyclothymic. And then your investigator went on to characterize that as being states of psychosis and bipolar. And of course, that's not true.
Okay.
It's not what it is. But apparently, something was said about her moodiness that got put down in this way.
Okay. So the investigator wrote, it's your feeling that the investigator was not accurately reflecting that disorder?
Well, I don't think the report accurately reflects Dr. Jacobson's findings, but apparently something was said about her moodiness and must have been said about her having times she was down and times she was up.
Well, when you read the trial transcripts from the divorce trial, there was testimony in regards to Dr. Nelson about talking to Dr. Jacobson and him coming with that diagnosis. Is that correct?
Who coming with what?
That Dr. Jacobson coming with the diagnosis.
Of cyclothymic?
Yes.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. And there was a prescription there was a prescription that she received at that time, Xanax, is that correct?
I think that is right.
And what is Xanax used for?
Treating anxiety.
And and is that something that is associated with depressive disorder sometimes? Anxiety?
Well, most of the people who have anxiety disorders don't have depressive illness. The vast majority of people given Xanax for anxiety don't have anything wrong with them. It's the most commonly prescribed class of drugs in America, with many millions of people on it. But it's true that people who are depressed often get anxious too.
And how about Xanax? I mean, and how about Prozac?
Prozac's a fine drug.
Is it what?
Is a fine drug
For what?
treating depression.
Okay. Now, do you know what she was prescribed in the jail?
Objection goes to a period post-murders.
Sustained. After she wasn't in jail after the homicides. That's what we're talking about, isn't it?
That's why I'm objecting.
Sustained.
Well, doctor, you testified that you would not classify her as suffering from depression.
At what time?
So your objection is vague.
Yes.
Sustained.
The Dr. DeFrancesca's diagnosis was, her diagnosis is the time that she saw Elisabeth Broderick. Is that correct? Didn't she say that she saw Elisabeth Broderick and her diagnosis would be suffering from major depression?
I don't know, I'd be surprised if it was admitted, her post. Perhaps that's what she was testifying to, what was wrong with her after the homicides, but I thought she was testifying about before.
It's a good time to take the afternoon recess, Mr. Early. Take our afternoon recess this time, ladies and gentlemen. Please remember the admonition not to discuss the case among yourselves, nor allow anyone else to discuss it with you, nor form any opinions till it's finally submitted to you. See you tomorrow, 9 o'clock. Have a nice evening.
Okay, we are done with Betty for today. And now we're going to go to the penalty phase of the Baby in a River trial. And this should redirect you. I say should. Because I think Marty's gaslighting me. He always tells me it didn't redirect. I'll see you in a few minutes.